Well, it's pretty good time now. So, Daniel, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I think a lot of you guys probably know who I am. I'm the CEO and owner of Shoot, Create, Captivate. I'm a full-time photographer based in the Czech Republic, and well, I shoot full-time and I also teach full-time. So, uh, like I said, you guys probably know where I am from. And Andrew, I don't know if we want to start right now, or we just want to wait a few moments for some more
You
people
want
to
to jump over to your screen?
yeah, I guess so.
There
Let's
we
just
go.
minimize that.
Yeah, there we go. Shoot,
Okay.
create, captivate.
Yeah, it's my permanent
Background. Yeah,
background. Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
it's good.
Okay, so guys, today obviously you would have seen from the stream details. This is about portrait photography. A little bit about my background. I've been shooting full time here in the Czech Republic since 2013, and I started off my career here basically. What had happened is we moved over to the Czech Republic with my daughter, and I started photographing her as a newborn. And I also took a chance at doing portrait photography here in the Czech Republic. So that's kind of where things all developed. And then back in 2018, I decided to dabble with a bit of teaching. And well, we're now in 2022, and the education in photography is what I focus on quite a lot. I still shoot for clients. But today, I really just wanted to give you guys an overview of my workflow and how I shoot my portraits and how I bring in my work into places like Lightroom, as you can see here on our screen here. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an overview of the initial process, because a lot of the way I shoot and process has a lot to do with how I shoot. Now, as you can see here, we've got a shoot here inside of Lightroom. So essentially,
And Daniel,
yep, yes,
I'm going to
sorry.
go to full screen view so everyone can see details a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You're going to see that a bit better now.
Yep. Better. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So as you can see here, we've got Shoot, Create, Captivate, and we're sitting inside of Lightroom. Now, just to start things from the roots, really, a lot of how I shoot and how I edit depends on how I capture things at camera level. And what you're essentially seeing here up on my screen are out of camera results. Now, there's essentially three main fundamentals to my work. The very first one, and this is the most important one, is the way I find light in.
Daniel,
Yeah,
you
sorry.
seem to your microphone is a little choppy. Not
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. Is that better?
It's a little chopping in and out.
Is it? Okay. I don't have anything else running.
Not
Maybe I'll
sure.
make this smaller. Is that better?
No, I'm not sure what settings changed, but
Okay. I don't see anything else that's changed yet.
yeah,
I haven't got anything else running yet.
yeah. You want to
Is that
check
better?
your settings real quick in the bear with us for 1 second. Maybe just
Yeah, yeah, I'm here.
check your settings in the StreamYard and see.
Your cancellation, automatically adjust volume, maybe.
You sound better already.
Hold on. Okay. Shall we try that? Does that sound better?
Yeah, it does sound better. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine it sounds better now. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So yeah,
Let's get back into
back
action.
in Lightroom.
All right. There we go. So back in Lightroom. Okay. So getting back to the main crux here. Okay. So the first thing is I'm looking for excellent light, good quality light. And I love shooting in natural light. That's one of the first fundamentals that I'm looking for in my portraits before anything goes into Photoshop, okay, or Lightroom in this instance. Okay, so number one, I'm looking for great light. As you can see here, we've got the catch light in our subject's eyes.
we've got this soft, beautiful wash of light across our subjects. And a lot of people have told me, Dan, don't lie to us. You're using strobes. And I'm like, no, I'm not using strobes at all. But this is one of my typical sessions here. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got the straight out of camera shot here, and I'm always looking for those little catch lights in the eyes, because for me, those catch lights create that sparkle, that connection in the subject's eyes. The eyes are the windows to the soul, and when it's got those little shiny bits in there, those little catch lights, that's what I'm looking for whenever I'm going out to shoot. So, like I said, I'm looking for this good, soft quality of light. You can see there's nice, soft shadows everywhere. You can see here in this instance, we've got the sun behind the subjects over here. And this is creating this beautiful rim light in our subjects. Now, behind me is beautiful open skies, okay? And this is what's creating that soft wash of light. The second element that I try to get forth at the shoot is creating that depth of field. Now, I use a couple of lenses in my setup to create lots of depth of field. I'll give you guys a little rundown on that right now. My first lens is a 50mm 1.4. Second lens is a 85mm, either 1.2, as you can see here, 1.4 or 1.8. After the 85 is a 105mm f1.4. After that is a 135 1.8, and then of course one of my favorites is the 200mm f2. A lot of folks know me as the 200mm guy, and I think I probably single-handedly put Nikon back on the map in terms of the very old 200mm f2 manual focus lenses. I think I got those selling for the guys again, because it was back in 2017 when I picked up a very old Nikon 200mm f2 from 1977, and it was just a manual focus lens, and I utterly, absolutely fell in love with that lens. Since then, I've upgraded to the autofocus version of the 200mm focal lengths. So as you can see here, a lot of my images have got a lot of depth of field, and I love creating that separation of my subjects from a background, because it puts a lot of emphasis on our subjects. Okay.
And Daniel, can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
So RIP or RIP says,
Yep.
so I've been dying to ask, to get that bokeh, are you 610mm or further from the subject? I've seen some of your behind the scenes.
Yeah, so in terms of the working distances, I'm never really paying attention to those working distances. What's more critical for me is trying to frame in as close as possible to subjects. Now, obviously, when you start using the longer focal lengths, like the 105, 135, and 200mm f2, it's going to put you automatically further back from subjects. Okay, that distance I'll never measure really. I could probably fall off a cliff behind me, because I'm not paying attention what I'm doing there. But as long as I'm framing tightly on my subject, this is how I'm kind of trying to get the maximized results from these lenses. So, even when you look at an image like this over here, I've come in pretty tight. I'm at f1.2, and that's probably going to lead to the next question. Is like, well, how are you getting everybody in sharp focus at that aperture? It's really just about keeping everybody on the same plane of focus. The little girl's head over here, for example, is in line with Dad's head here, but also because I'm using a slightly longer focal length, the width of the focal plane is a little bit wider. So it's a little bit easier getting subjects in focus, even at these wide apertures. I hope that kind of answers your question there.
I think so.
So you can see over here with all of these, and I'm going to actually scroll along here to a point where we've got a image like this over here. Okay, so sometimes I will narrow my aperture in order to get everybody in focus, especially when it involves animals and children. Sometimes I have to create a little bit more of a deeper depth of field here. So for example, over here, I'm shooting with a 200mm f1.8 Canon lens, but I've got it at f2.8. But I still got this beautiful soft out of focus background here because I'm kind of trying to frame in quite tight. But I've gone for an aperture of f2.8 here because I knew the doggy was moving around a little bit and the little girl was moving around a little bit. But as you can see here, in this case here, everybody's sharp. Daddy sharp, doggy sharp, the girl sharp, and mommy sharp over here. So I've placed everybody strategically on this plane of focus. And I know it doesn't matter who I focus on in this particular image. I just know that everybody's going to be in focus. And this is something that comes with practice. You know, especially when you're getting back into position, you're not moving off that plane of focus. You know, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, nice.
So as I go through this, you know, I'm now you'll notice that I've gone back to f1.8 in this case here because I've got a single subject and I'm really trying to blow out the background. But what I'm trying to aim for in this particular shoot is that beautiful light. And when we zoom into the subject here, look at that little catch light in the eyes. So if I recap here very briefly, is that number one, we've gone for beautiful soft light patterns, as you can see here. And I know that I've got my direction of light correct here because I've got the catch lights in the eyes, okay? The second fundamental there is that I've got beautiful, soft, out of focus backgrounds, okay? So that's separating my subject from the background. It's also minimizing distracting elements because I'm able to really focus in on a particular portion of my scene, and I've got that ability to hide stuff away when using these longer lenses. Okay, so I'm looking for that clean, uncluttered background. Okay, the second element over here, sorry, rather the third element here is the choices in colors. Okay. When it comes to dressing my clients, I'm paying attention to the wardrobe. Now, obviously, in this case over here, the little girl's jumper is quite bright compared to them, but she didn't have anything else. But the important thing, mom and dad were kind of dressed with more natural, muted colors. That's what I usually tell my clients to wear. But in this case, yeah, the little girl didn't have a muted color top here. And I said to them, okay, that's no problem because I can change it in Photoshop. And that's exactly what we've done here. So I would say in terms of that third element, in terms of colors, that happens more in the post-production part of the process. But I always try to get the best I can out of clients before they come to the shoot. You know, I get them dressed accordingly.
Smart.
So it's really getting them in there with muted colors that work in conjunction with the scene that they're going to be in. I'm going to just bring up another image here so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. So for this particular,
and I was going to say that by focusing on the muted colors, for sure, it makes it so your eye can go to the portrait itself and not be distracted by loud or bright colors.
Yes. And this is always what I'm trying to aim for. Because I'm shooting outdoors in these more natural scenarios, I tend to try to go for the more muted pastel color palettes, because another thing that influences skin tones is what subjects are wearing. Okay. If they're wearing bright and glary fluorescent colors, you often get a kickback of those colors into your subject's faces and skin tones. Okay. So that's another element there that I'm looking out for. But just reversing back to the point about the lighting conditions that I shoot in, I'm looking for these soft, diffused lighting patterns in my scenes. And it can be found in so many different places at so many different times of the days. My usual shooting times for portraits is usually about 3 to 4 hours before sundown. But I can also do the opposite. I can do 3 to 4 hours after sunrise, for example. Okay, that time frame rather. Okay, so from the moment the sun comes up, I've got a 4-hour gap that I can shoot in. Okay, so if you look at the grand scheme of things, I've got 8 hours a day to shoot in beautiful light, or at least in the patterns of light that I look for.
So a quick question from Andrew is, what do you do if the person you're shooting is known for their bright colors? Like that's their signature style. I guess.
Well, I think the thing that happens really is that the type of clients that you attract will be based on the output of work that you're showing in your portfolio. If you've got people who are known for bright colors, um, you know, you're going to maybe shoot them in a different scenario. Maybe you would shoot them in an urban kind of setting. Okay. But the thing is that people are coming to me for a particular look. They know that they're coming to me because I've got this beautiful selection of colors. When we speak to our clients, we tell them, we command them what to wear, and they put all of that trust in us because they've seen my portfolio already. They see what people wear in those shoots, and quite often our clients will go, oh yeah, we saw Sarah and Mike's shoot and we've decided that we want to dress similar to them. So they'll come up with very similar clothing styles or color choices. So it's more of a case that I'm dictating what happens in the shoot rather than them dictating to me. If you've got a client that likes these bright colors, then that's entirely up to them. But maybe you aren't the right guy for them then. If they want to wear bright colors, somebody else might be able to photograph
different
them.
style.
Yes, a different style. I've put my daughter in bright colors, but I've put her into situations where it's an urban scene where she's maybe like a skateboarder girl or she's got a pair of roller skates on and she's got these bright element colors and these fluorescent colors in a graffiti kind of scene. You got to think about what kind of scene you're putting your subjects in. It wouldn't be any good dressing my clients in these bright fluorescent colors if I'm shooting them out in nature. You know what I mean?
And there's a couple more questions.
Yeah, go for it.
So David asks, do you ever use Photoshop to enhance the bokeh?
No, that's a categorically no. That's not something that I do. I try to get the most out of the gear that I'm using. You can see how much of this depth of field that we've got here. There are processes that I used to use in the past where I would reduce the hard edges of bokeh balls, but that's not something that I use anymore. I mean, that goes way back into 2017, perhaps even before I got these long lenses. But no, definitely not something that I have the time and patience for to work in Photoshop, to be honest. What you're seeing over here is, I mean, we can have a look at this image over here, for example.
There's another quick question, which is just, has this always been your style or has your style changed over time?
Yeah, good question. It has been something that's evolved over time. I've always liked depth of field in my images, but probably not as pronounced as now. One of the things is that I think the major thing that changed for me ultimately was the lighting patterns. Now, when I started out, and this is going to sound crazy, all I did was shoot with strobes outdoors, indoors, wherever I had the opportunity to shoot for clients. I was shooting strobes all the way through. Okay. But we got to a point, I think probably around 2016, where it got a bit crazy for us because we were shooting at least 300 clients in a year. Okay. And Eva would come with me to these shoots. She would have to do the translations. She'd have to guide subjects in the shoot. She'd have to hold my strobes. She'd have to work with the wardrobe of clients. She'd have to do all kinds of things during the shoot. So I said to her, look, darling, I'm going to have to lighten this workload for you. And I said to myself, well, she's running around with the strobes a lot after these kiddos and doing all sorts of crazy things, holding up the strobes so they don't get blown over by wind and all sorts. And I said to her, let's try to shoot maybe in some good light patterns. And during the course of shooting all of these clients, there were instances where I saw there's these beautiful pockets of light in these locations that didn't need strobes. And as time went by, I sort of started to understand those light patterns and where they were coming from and how they were actually forming. And it's that point where I started to switch away from strobes and actually start using natural light more. And
Nice.
now we're here in 2022, and that's all I shoot with outdoors. Okay.
Nice.
Natural light is just, oh man, it's, it's something I get excited about, completely
Beautiful.
excited about.
Yeah, beautiful.
So yeah, it's the light that really ultimately changed how I looked at my scenes, because it forced me into a position where I'd be shooting in a scenario like this over here, where I had beautiful light on my subject. I didn't have a very busy background with hard lighting patterns, with overhead light and all of these other things that come with shooting at the wrong times of the day or looking at the wrong places for light. That all changed for me. So here's obviously a before image, and here is a image that's been edited. But you can see I have not done anything to the background. It wasn't necessary. So we still got this beautiful wash of light on our subject, and it really is just enhancing what is already existing. Was there any other question there?
No, I think you're good for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to recap, so we got the light, we've got clients dressed accordingly. We're picking out locations that are distraction free. We're picking out lenses that create beautiful depth of field. I've got so many examples over here. Like for example, this here was shot with the 200 f1.8, and then I moved along a little bit out of the forest, and then I started shooting with an 85 millimeter here at 1.2, and we still got that beautiful depth of field. But what complements this here is, of course, the beautiful light that we've got in the scene. And again, you can see, look at those little catch lights in the eyes. Those are the things that really stick out here. So when we combine all of these elements together, we've got a beautiful soft depth of field in the background. And then, of course, we've got the soft light on our subject. So that's, again, a factor of this soft pastel look that we've got going on. And then we've got the colors that she's wearing. And, of course, there again, you can see that we've got very soft natured colors here, pastel colors. And these colors also aren't by accident. It's by design as well. You know, when we speak to our clients, we tell them what kind of colors we're looking for. And quite often, what they'll do is they'll throw everything out on their bed or over the floor, and they'll take a picture of it, and I'll send it to everyone. I'll say, can you show Dan these images of what we've got planned? And I'll go, yeah, okay, that looks good together. Or no, that doesn't look so cool. I don't like that kind of style. So we start building that connection with our clients right in the beginning, because one, that's going to show that you care. Two, that's going to show that you are really switched on in terms of what you want, and that puts a lot of confidence into your subject. You get what I mean?
And Rip, or rest in peace. Yes, I know you have a 70 to 200 f2.8, but do you prefer your primes?
Yes, I do prefer the primes, and on that particular subject, the reason why I like primes is obviously the faster apertures that you can work at. Now, that isn't just to do with getting a lot more depth of field and separation of your subject. That's just one of the elements. But for me, it's all about getting faster shutter speeds, because when you can start working at, for example, like here, we're working with an 85 1.2, we're shooting at 1/800th of a second, but that allows me to have a very low ISO of 100, and that results in cleaner images for me, okay, and sharper images, because I'm able to work at a faster shutter speed without having to tie myself down to tripods and those types of things. And that becomes more prevalent when you start shooting with longer lenses like 70 to 200 or 200 millimeter f2, because you want that faster shutter speed. Now, I usually work with this little formula where I like to shoot at a shutter speed which is twice that of the focal length that I'm using. So just to clarify, if I've got, for example, a 50 millimeter lens on my camera, the slowest shutter speed that I would work with would be 1/100th of a second. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, Andrew?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Okay.
so.
So it's always 2 times the focal length. So if I've got, for example, a long 200 millimeter lens, let's say, for example, it's a 70 to 200 and I've racked it out to 200 millimeter, my slowest shutter speed that I would like to work comfortably with, unaided, would be 1/400th of a second, okay, for a static portrait. If that subject was moving a lot faster, say jumping up and down, then naturally I would want to go for a faster shutter speed. That makes sense?
Yep.
Yep. So yeah, coming back to this. So now we've got the perfect color scheme going on here. Can you notice the little bits of green over here? And look at the green on her top here. So we've got those greens working together. We've got the little waistcoat type of thing that she's got on here. And that works in nicely with the colors that we've got in the background here.
It's very well balanced.
And it's, yeah, exactly. And this is what I'm looking for when I'm shooting out in these locations. I know for a fact that in this particular location, I've got the long grass over here. That's a creamy color. I've got those little hints of green in the lower ends of the grass here, and that kind of really works out with what she's got on. So I'm trying to connect my subjects with the background. So I'm getting this harmony going with the colors. And of course, when I take it into post-production, I'm now removing some of those orange colors in the background there a little bit, and I'm bringing the color palette a little bit closer together. Do you understand what I'm saying by that? So when I'm in the post-production process, and we'll have a look at that in a moment, actually. What I'm trying to do in my images is I'm trying to simplify the color palettes into maybe 2 or 3 colors maximum. That's excluding maybe hair color and skin tones. So when I'm working with the colors that my subjects are wearing, and I've got the background colors, I try to really minimize and simplify the color palette, because I feel like when you've only got a limited amount of colors in your image, it makes a stronger composition. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
I mean, if I've got a whole bunch of different colors going on in the background, you get a bit lost. I can open
you don't want it to be too busy. So.
No. So like, for example, over here, we've got the colors of the lavender here. I've got a connection with Amy and the lavenders in the background here. When you look at the basic color structure of this image, and this is straight out of camera, we've got those blues in the sky. We've got the blues on her denim outfit here, and then we've got the purples over here, and we've got the hair color and and those yellows in the background. So already here we're starting off with a very basic color palette. And I think in this particular image, when I actually edited the final, I changed these yellows over here to green. So I had the same green in the grass in the background as what we got here in the foreground. And I really simplified the color palette there. So when you go through the entire range of images over here, obviously, like I said, these are now inside of Lightroom. They've all got a good starting point. Okay, they all shot at the same color temperature with the same settings. You can take this entire range over here inside of Lightroom, and I can do a global edit to them in any way I want and apply the same settings across the images. And this is important. When I'm out in these shoots, I'll lock in my white balance to what I think it is for the scene. So for example, in this case over here, when we look at those details, we've got a, let me just reset that. I think I've moved that along here. Hold on. We're sitting at 6,400. So basically 6,500, which is daylight balance. Out in this open field where I was shooting, that was roughly where the white balance was for this particular image. Okay, so
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go for it.
Yep. And then when you're working on a series like this, do you tend to like to do your own developing from start to finish, or do you start off with a preset you've created and then tweak that?
Yeah, I do actually have a little bit of I do have a preset here. I've got one there called DV Photo 2021. So it gives me the primary settings that I would usually use for my images. Okay. Right. So this is exactly what I've kind of done here. And you can see it starts out at 6400. Okay. And from there, I will just then make the little adjustment. So yeah, I have created a preset based on these locations where I shoot. And I'm usually about in the ballpark with at least these settings over here. You get used to it. And when you see you start changing the same sliders all the time, you just write a preset for it.
That's right. Smart.
Yeah, this is kind of what I've done here. Exactly what I've done here. So you can see that we've got this good base to work off here.
And then Dan asks, do you use color grading to emphasize certain colors within the image depending on the scene?
Yes, I do. Yeah. We'll have a look at an edit of one of these images. Let me check. Maybe one of these over here. Maybe even this one here. So just coming back to the settings over here. So yeah, I would sometimes work on just one image. Okay, let's go for maybe this one over here. I'll work on this image over here and I'll make a small adjustment to the white balance, and I'll pick up the exposure here. And you can kind of see that I'm going exactly the same direction as what that preset was.
Right.
And I'm happy there. But the thing is, the important thing to note here is that everything was right in the first place. These are just simple tweaks. And now I can take whatever I've done here and apply it to that entire range of images, you know, holding shift down, clicking that first image and clicking the, let's say, for example, this one over here, and then going previous, and then all of those settings that I've just made to that first image get populated across all of these. And that's a good thing. When you start doing your proof galleries for clients, this is a breeze, to be honest. I've already culled the images here inside of Lightroom. So I've culled them down to 260 odd images over here. But it's easy for me to start with the basics here, apply that little preset across all of those ranges of images where they're all similar, and then send these all off to the client to choose their images. Okay. Right. With me. Yeah. So they will come back to me and I'll go, okay, can you edit, for example, in this case here, image 129. They're just going to see a number. That's something else that I do here. I actually rename my files. So you can see here, yanet1.cr3. Right. So I'm giving them in a sequence of all the culled images that I felt was good enough. Well, that passed my grading essentially. And then I will rename them here inside of Lightroom. So you'll see that they've all got their identifying names. I use a service called Zenfolio, and I upload my proof gallery to Zenfolio, and then the client will choose their images from Zenfolio. And when you upload them to Zenfolio, all you're going to see is just an image number. When they tell me, oh, Dan, can I have image number 127? I know exactly where it is in my library here, and I can go to it. I can go to it.
Good. Smart.
Any questions? Yeah, it just makes that process so much easier. What I've done.
I think we're good for questions, just
yeah. Okay, so for example, I'm going to start with editing this particular image. Now I've got a Adobe Canon profile here, which is looking a bit funky at the moment. It's made this image a little bit more warmer than it should be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down my settings over here. So I'm going to work essentially, first of all, by correcting the white balance. It was quite warm. And what we'll do is we'll give it a little bit more brightness here. And then I'll look at cropping it. I like to crop my images here in Lightroom with the 5:7 format. So you can see here. And what we'll do is we'll lift this up. Now, one of the things that I see quite often with people starting out, they leave a lot of headspace with subjects. Now, you can see that I've got a pretty tight frame over here to start off with. And the reason why I'm framing in so tightly is that I want to amplify that depth of field in my work. You can see we've got this beautiful out of focusness in the background. Of course, I'm using an 85mm 1.2 at 1.2. But stepping in closer to your subjects really accentuates that depth of field because you're closer to your subject. So obviously, you're going to have a lot more depth of field, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, so what we'll do is just reset this back to 0 here. We've got this little S curve going on over here, and that's pretty much where I'll leave it. Sometimes I'll come in with the sharpening for this particular image. The 85mm f1.2 from Canon is quite soft, wide open, and I'm shooting on a Canon EOS R5 here, so that's a very high resolution camera. One of the steps that I am going to deploy here, let me just zoom into her face, just drag that down. I'm going to do a little sharpening tactic over here that really works quite well without adding too much noise into your image. You'll come down to the details option over here, like that. And what I like to do in this instance over here is ramp up the radius and ramp up the detail. And look how much sharper that's looking. And we haven't even moved the sharpness slider over here. So we've just increased these two sliders over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly lift this up till we get a nice sharp image like that. Okay. Can you see that on your screens there, guys?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, so we've added a lot of sharpness in there without adding in a lot of noise. One of the things that does happen when you start sharpening an image, you start introducing noise into your images. But another thing that I've got active here is that I've ramped up the luminance here to about 20. So I'm starting off with a fairly noiseless image over here. What happens is when you import your raw files into Lightroom, even when you shoot at very low ISOs like 100, there's sometimes a little bit of inherent noise in the images that I've at least picked up. So I actually bring this little noise ratio up here to about 20. You don't need to do this, but I like to do it to keep the images nice and clean. Sure. So yeah, go on.
Yeah, it looks good. Looks good.
One of the things that I have done here is I've disabled the enabled profile correction. Oh, sorry. I've disabled it in this instance. You can see there's a lot of vignetting around this image because we're shooting it at 1.2. And for this particular lens, there is quite a bit of vignetting on the edges. In normal circumstances, I would leave that so it gets the attention of the viewer into the center of the image, or at least where the subject is. But I'm going to turn it off in this case here because I want to brighten up those edges. You can see how much different that looks.
It makes everything brighter when you do that.
It makes it brighter generally. And there's a little bit of distortion correction there. But for this particular image, I want to keep the corners from going too dark because it's out in the open. In any other cases, I'd probably leave that vignetting on. But in this scene here, I'd like to keep it off. So you can see here, just inside of Lightroom, how much better our image looks without even taking it into Photoshop yet. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to go edit in Adobe Photoshop 2022. And what I do then is I analyze my image for distracting objects as a primary thing. Okay. Second thing that I look to do is look for distracting colors. Okay. We're going to wait for this to open up over here. Don't know why that was paused up there. There we go. All right. So what I'm looking at when I analyze my image, let me just get up my tablet here. I'm going to throw a blank layer. You guys don't need to be doing this. This is just for our reference. So like I said, I'm looking for distracting elements in my image. Let's just make this red here so you guys can see what I'm looking at. A lot of my work that I do to get clean images and the clean distraction-free images is that I look and pay attention to lots of the details. So for example, this over here would be a distracting element for me. This over here, okay? So we're going to go through a whole bunch of things here. These are distracting elements. These over here in the background over here, maybe not so much, but it throws my eye at least, if you know what I mean. Yeah. This little edge over here. And now we're looking at the macro details. So when I zoom in, I'm looking at little things on the hat over here, maybe some little wrinkles on the face, some uneven skin textures. And like I said, now we're looking at the macro details of things. When I zoomed out and I was viewing my image at 100%, or at least at this level here, I saw some of the bigger things that were distracting my eye. When I zoom in, then I'm looking at the finer details here. So these are all distracting elements. Okay, so pay attention to that. Those are elements.
And then yep. asks is, don't you think the black on the leg is distracting? Which I believe is her boot coming up, right?
I could probably crop that out there. That's
Sure.
yeah, it could be. I mean, yeah, you're right. We could crop it in there. We can look at that. So we're looking at the image and we're identifying all these little things that could distract the eye. Just very briefly here. Okay, I'm not going to go into too much detail, or we could spend hours. Okay, the next thing I'm looking at is color distractions. Okay, now this isn't too bad in this image, but I do feel that this area of my image needs to be, I'll call it a color CD, color distraction. Okay, there's a color distraction there. This actually could be regarded as a color distraction. Okay, so it's colors that's off base to what we've got in the rest of our image here, but it's mainly this area over here. These yellows are too yellow compared to the colors that we've got in the grass here. You get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you're always looking for the odd color out. So the odd color out really here is those bright yellows, and those bright yellows pull the eye slightly past the subject here. Not too bad, but I'm being very self-critical here. Okay.
Yeah, it is different though, for sure.
Yeah. Those tonalities that we've got in those yellows are kind of swaying in very close to the tonalities that we've got in the face. But remember what I said right in the beginning, I like to simplify the colors. So this is what we're going to essentially do with this particular portrait. We're going to simplify those colors. Okay. So we can get working on that. Very simple. Some of the other colors that's a little bit offbeat here. It looks like this lady does a lot of fake tanning, to be honest. She's got a lot of red skin tones here, a little bit of oranges going on there. I removed a lot of that by correcting the white balance in the first instance. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to create another layer. So we Control J, and I'm just going to go through all of these little elements here that I feel like these little distracting elements. Sorry, by the way, we in the spot healing brush tool. Now, one of the things that I do love using here is the Wacom tablet. Now I can just really easily go over these little areas just with a tablet. And kaboom. This is a little bit messy over here, but we can.
It's amazing how good that tool has become.
It
Spot
has
healing.
very, very intuitive. Maybe in this case here. No, yeah, there we go. I just got over that little part there, but it's following it. It's getting it there. Maybe we'll just undo that quickly. Maybe I was too overzealous with that part there. We could come in here, and maybe that brush was too thick. Maybe I'll just
do a certain part at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, just little bits at a time. Maybe we can build that up.
The way it blends with the coat is quite nice, though.
Yeah, and that goes out quite quickly. And sometimes you might have to come in with a little, the different tool here. For example, you could use the clone stamp tool, and you could sample from that little edge there, and then just move it along, just paint it in. There we go.
I've seen that making selections and then using that content to wear a fill sometimes does a good job in certain.
Yeah, you got to kind of just feel your way around what's
using the patch tool for that, right?
Yeah.
Get it to line up is hard sometimes. Yeah.
You could do this. You could just grab the section tool and then
feathering it a little bit.
J. Yeah, press Control J and just move it a little bit down, and then you could use that tool just to line it back up again. Yeah. There we go. And then you could throw a little mask over that.
And it's fun bending pixels, right?
Yeah. There you go. That ought to do it. Okay, so we'll carry on going around the image here. Coming down to the bottom end over here, again back to the spot healing brush tool on that second layer, just coming in there and quickly going over that. And you can see here that we've got a bit of a hard edge there. Now, the way I get rid of that little hard edge is just use the patch tool. There we go.
Blends.
And just blends it out nicely. If you remember, Rip said we could actually just crop that away underneath it. That black area.
Yeah, get rid of the
at least somewhere, maybe over there.
Just underneath the coat. Yeah.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yep.
Okay, so we got those little, oops, come back here. And here, traversing across those is quite intelligent. If you look at all of those little bits of blades of grass that arch in the way there, and I take those sort of going horizontally there, that's a pretty good job. So guys, just to remind you, I'm using a Wacom tablet, and I love this tablet because you're able to control the size of your brush because of the pressure sensitivity. Now, some people don't like to remove little moles and stuff, but I've got this habit of doing that. So just coming into those little micro elements that we had, we're just taking those out, those little strands of hair. I know it may be pedantic for some, but I kind of like working on those details, particularly in the blacks. When people wear black, sometimes I just detest it when they come up with blacks, with black t-shirts and stuff, because you
see every dot
with those little bits of lint and stuff. It's like, come on. When the lady's like, oh, but black makes me look slim. Oh, yeah, maybe it's not always good for us.
Doubles your work, doubles your retouching work.
So you can see that we've taken some of those basic distracting elements out there. You know, we've got all of these patterns going in a vertical manner. So I took out those ones that were going horizontally there. Get what I mean?
Yeah, it looks nice.
So I'm going to just flatten this for a moment because I like to do things in stages. Now we've got these elements over here that are highlighted that were kind of distracting. Okay. Now I like to get rid of these areas in a lot simpler way. You can see that everything's in a nice depth of field here. It's all blurry there. Basically, I run a frequency separation action here. Okay. And that breaks the image up into textures. There's a tone correction layer here and a colors and tones layer here. Now, this action is available if you are signed up into the membership. You've got the opportunity to download these actions. So this action is designed to have this little tone corrections part in the middle here. Now you've got the colors and tones at the bottom here. And all I'm going to do with these areas over here, I see those as blobs of color. You with me?
Yep.
I don't see them really particularly as objects there. So I'll go over to the patch tool and I'm going to do this.
Yeah, blends very nice.
Blends, and I can just pick it up from other areas over here and just blend those colors. Okay, that's one way to do that. The other way to do that is come over to this little section that says tone corrections. It's like it's basically a blank layer. I can press I on the keyboard and I can sample some of this color over here. And with a nice big fat brush, coming up on your screens there, with a very low flow, not opacity, like a low flow of like 5 or 6%. And you'll notice that I haven't got my pressure sensitivity over here set. I've just got one big fat brush. And all I'm going to do is just lightly paint over that little area there. Oops.
And why do you bring down the flow as opposed to...
The reason why I'm bringing down the flow instead of opacity, watch how this works differently. If I bring up the flow to 100%, it paints a definitive amount of paint onto the canvas, essentially. Okay. If I bring down the opacity, the flow remains the same on my pen, and it doesn't matter how many times I go over that area, it doesn't change the amount of
distribute paint so much, right?
Yeah. So if I just undo that, if I bring this up over here to 100% opacity, oops, come on, there we go, and I bring down my flow to like 5%, if I brush over that area, that first stroke is very light. If I keep brushing over that area, I build up that color in the area. It kind of works like a dry brush would.
Yeah, like watercolor type of thing.
Yeah,
right?
like watercolor, exactly. So you can paint over these areas, and you can really control the amount of color being distributed in that little area. So I'm still keeping it very natural looking. And this is kind of brings out my days of school, art at school.
Yeah, David says, I think Flow has a much better control.
Yeah, definitely has much more control. So it's now essentially just taken out those distracting elements of the greens that were there. Okay, you obviously got control over the blend. If you want to keep it a little bit more natural, not take it away completely. But
And then there's a question about frequency separation. So
Yep.
Igor asks, would you use frequency separation to correct wrinkles on the clothing, particularly on the sleeve of the right hand?
Yeah, definitely. That is something that I usually do. In fact, okay, so on that point, let me just cover this quickly here. Okay, so we've gotten rid of that element in the background. Okay, so I'm going to do another little stage here. I'm going to flatten the image again, and then I'm going to run frequency separation on its own again here. Okay, so we're doing this in stages here, because obviously what I do in this area is going to be different to what I do in that area of my image. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Not going to necessarily apply the same technique over here. There I had a combination of working with tone corrections and colors and tones. So let's say, for example, I want to get rid of these little creases over here, not necessarily the center one where it's been ironed nicely, but we can go to textures over here, for example, and I can grab my patch tool and I can grab that little area there and then get rid of the hard edged creases there. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was one layer, one level. Let's go over the little area here. Okay. Now this underlying area is basically color. Okay, so if you switch that off, we've got colors there. You can still see those wrinkles and the colors there. Okay, let's switch on that texture layer. Now I'm going to go to the colors and tones layer here. I'm going to go over to this brush tool, and I'm going to go to the mixer brush tool here, right here. Okay, and these are the parameters that I've got set currently. I've got my brush as a clean brush. Okay, I've got this switched off over here and automatically switches to custom. The wet percentage is 8%, the load is 5%, and then the mix is 90%. Okay, now watch what happens now. I'm going to just paint over that area and look how I'm smoothing that out.
Works very nice.
Okay, I'm only affecting the underlying tonalities there of that
It's magic.
So, boom. Okay,
it's magic, right?
So I can come into any portions of the image over here where I feel like I want to blend like some of the shading or shadows in that area, or the folds in the fabric. I can really smooth out. Here's a good example right down here on her leg here. Okay, I'm using the mixer brush tool to blend those colors together. Look at that, and it's gone.
Oh.
And I'm going over her skin tones even here to a degree. So look at that, before and after. So I use frequency separation actions like this to smoothen out clothes. I use it now as well to actually smoothen out certain shadows. Like we could come into this shaded area over here, and I could work with my mixer brush tool on this layer, and I can smooth out the rotation of this bright area into that shaded area, or vice versa. I can really soften the shadow there. So I can use frequency separation to enhance shadows or make shadows softer and more bright, or less brighter. I mean, darker, correction.
Right.
That makes sense? So I can, while we're on this frequency separation action here, with my mixer brush here, I can blend this area of her cheek better into the section of the brighter part of the cheek. You understand? So I can go here and I can mix those colors together. And here we've got those uneven skin tones. I can really just go over those areas like that, soften them out. smooth out that transition from one part of the face to the other. So if you've got like this bright highlight over here, I can use that mixer brush tool and then just blend the colors in that area together. So we're already doing the skin editing portion of this.
In the in the options bar at the top with the mixer brush, the wet and the load is what makes it kind of more subtle.
Yes.
So
When you set at those percentages, then the way in which that behaves is it blends it a lot slower and smoother. So you're going over sections of the image very softly, and with those settings, you're not blending too much, but just the right amount to control. I mean, look at the shading that we just done on her nose there, for example. We smooth that out there. We smooth the highlights in the nose over here, in that little area there. Okay.
And Daniel, your microphone's kind of cracking.
Yeah, it might be the editing here. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes on the high resolution images like this, it tends to tax my system a little bit. It steals resources a little bit. Okay, so yeah, coming back to that, yes, we've used frequency separation action here to smooth out the clothing. There's a little bit of a spot over here that looks a little bit weird. There we go. Yep. Just ignore the step, guys. What I'm going to do is just to release some of the resources. Yeah, I've got a very high resolution image, as you see here. I'm just going to put this down to 4256 pixels, so we don't tax the system too much. Okay. All right. So, yeah, where we were. Okay. So we use frequency separation to really smooth out some of the textures that we had on the arm here. I left that little seam in here where the iron, it just looks a bit more natural there. And then at the same time, we use that frequency separation together with the mixer brush tool to smooth out the transition from one skin tone to another. Now you can see that there's a lot of red in the skin over here. We'll get to that in a moment. Now, one of the things that I wanted to say here is that we were talking about the yellows earlier on. Okay, so we've got these high-end yellows in the trees in the background here. I just want to mute those down a little bit so they're not competing for the attention of my skin tones of my subject. So what I'm going to do now is go to Hue and Saturation. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the master and go down to yellows here. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to ramp this all the way to the top here to 180. And you can see that a lot of the elements in my image has got lots of yellow in it. Okay. But you can see that there's an overlap with the reds here and the greens here. Okay. So what I need to do with this little selection box over here is just bring in those little ends there and closer together. So I'm getting a narrower selection of a particular range of colors. Okay. And all I'm looking to do is look for those yellows that we got in the background there. So I'm going to swing this over. Can you see that happening in the background?
Yeah, it's like green overlay.
Green, yeah. Yep. So I'm going to just extend
She's
that.
blue too, though.
Yeah, she is, because she's got a lot of yellows in her skin too. Now she looks like a Smurf. But all I'm looking to do is just capture those yellows in the background, and we've got some yellows in the foreground. Okay, I'm happy with that selection that we've got going on now. I might even extend it slightly like that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control-I or Command-I on a Mac, and we're going to invert that so we're hiding that selection away. And all I'm going to do now is change back to my normal brush here, and again with a fairly low, maybe increase this flow to like 30% or so, and just brush over those yellow portions in the background, just in those areas. Okay, nothing down here below. And nothing on her face either. Okay. And what I want to do in this case over here is just alter, first of all, maybe the hue. And essentially what I'm going to do here is boost up the lightness. Look at that. Kadoom.
Yeah, that blends a lot better.
That's a lot better. I could even push this back into the 0. Maybe I'll keep it at +10 here. I've changed the hue of those yellows to a bit more of a green, but I've also increased the lightness of that area. I can also come in. I could also drop down the saturation, which I think also works really the same. So what I've done here visually is bring down those yellows so they closer match the yellows in the foreground here. Okay, so when we turn that off,
well.
And now, can you see how your eyes change focus? Over here, they were picking up those strong yellows, and now, doo-dum. Now it
Yeah,
goes
you
down.
focus right on her. So
Exactly. Okay.
now,
One of the
I was going to say, with the way that you use the flow makes me, you know, I do more like photo composite work, but it makes me want to experiment with, instead of using opacity for the strength of my brush when I do like a layer mask blending, maybe try using flow instead.
Yeah, the flow behaves more like a paintbrush would. So if you
Yeah.
only put a little bit of paint on your brush and you keep going over a certain area, that first stroke will have one layer, then you put another layer on top of it, and that's kind of how this behaves.
And David has a question. Andrew has a question. What's the best resolution and size to work on? I guess it changes from client to client or job to job, but
Yeah, for me, I work with the full resolution that I'm getting out of my camera. For this instance over here, I just reduced it because I didn't want to have the system getting it taxed a little bit here because of the stream.
right.
That's
Sure.
literally all it was. I'm going out on full resolution. That said, when I'm delivering to clients, I seem to have this tendency to reduce my pixels to 4256 pixels, like I've kind of done now. That was just a bit of habit. So the JPEGs aren't extremely huge, but they're manageable if somebody wants to download. But normally it's just upload full resolution or
Right.
whatever resolution the image lands up to be. If you've cropped it, it might be a different resolution. So,
Nice.
but more often than
Yeah.
not, that I like to keep my images full resolution. So you can see here we've taken out those little distracting elements. We've now started to bring our colors in closer to where we want them to be, and now we can look at some of these skin tonality issues that we've got here. We've got some reds in the cheeks over here that we can deal with, but one of the little areas that really comes to the fore here is this hand over here.
So much lighter, right?
Yes, quite a lot lighter. No, I love these new selection tools in Photoshop. It's just so intuitive. Now it used to be like I used to use something called Topaz Remask to mask off things, but I don't even need that anymore. Now it's just so easy. Now you can just go around the hand like this. And
this is the object selection tool,
selection
correct?
tool, yeah, bloop, and there we go. It's like we've selected the hand, yeah, but okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to get that hand looking a little bit more in range with this hand over here. So what I'm going to do is one of two ways we can do this. I like to work with exposure. So we'll go to exposure, and then we'll go for gamma correction. Here, ramping up the gamma correction. Look at that.
Nice.
There we go. That's that first layer. One of the other things I want to do here is to throw a bit of a little bit more color into that hand as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and look for a photo filter. I'm going to go to this photo filter here. I'm going to click it once. It's going to make my whole image warmer. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this mask on top of that one. So I'm going to press Alt or Command on the Mac. I'm going to just drag this mask on top of that one. And it's going to ask me, do I want to replace that mask? And I'm going to say yes. You see what happened there? I've got that photo filter masked off there at the same time with the same mask as this exposure adjustment that we done.
Right. I like
Okay, so with that photo filter, I added a little bit more warmth to that hand. And now we've got it matching.
Yeah.
With this
Nice.
hand here. That was a pretty simple step. Now, like I said before, the rest of her, her face is quite red in comparison. As this tanning boots and stuff, and some of the folks over here. Anyways, we're going to look at correcting that. Okay, so we'll create another layer here, and I'll go Hue and Saturation. And what we're going to do is I'm going to click on the little hand tool here, and I'm going to sample the reds on the cheek here. Okay, so you're going to see it picks up as reds. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ramp this all the way to the top to 180. You can see that she's now turned into the Incredible Hulk's wife. And what we're going to do...
Shrek, right?
Shrek.
Yeah, Shrek.
What we're going to do is we're going to move this grouping over until we have no red selected. So we'll start right over here where it's in the blues and purple range. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly move this grouping back. And the first thing it's going to change is her lips, because they're the reddest portion of the face at the moment. And I'm going to keep sliding the slider. You can see now the nose has been selected here. And you can start seeing that some of these areas on the reds on the cheek are being selected. So I'm going to carry on moving. And there's where the predominant reds are in her tonalities of the skin in the face. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah, interesting.
Okay. And we can see that they're going to be down here on her fingers and her fingernails as well. What I'm looking to do is when I switch that mask off there, I mean that layer off, you can see this is the predominant reds in her skin tones. Now, you'll learn to see this visually as well. I'm seeing it without even looking at what Photoshop is picking up. I can see those are the red areas in her skin tones. Okay. And obviously here on her fingertips, this is all very common areas where you're going to see redder skin tones, hands and cheeks and noses. You with me? Now, all I'm going to do now, obviously, I don't want to change the color of her lips. So I need to delete away I want to mask off the lips. So I'm going to click and select black here. And what I'm going to do is just paint over lips. I don't want the lips to change. You're following, yeah?
Yep.
We got a question. If they're not following, shout. I'm going to come down to her fingernails, yeah? Because I don't want to change the hue on the fingernails. It's natural. Some ladies have got red nail polish or other colors. We don't want to change that. In her case, she's got red natural fingernails. Yeah. Okay. So we'll zoom out. And those are the reds in her skin tones. Now, all we need to do here is just move the slider back here until we get to about +10. Can you see the change in her skin tones?
Yeah, turned on
Very
before
red.
and after, yeah.
And after, we've taken out that reds a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to be a bit more aggressive here because her skin tones are quite red in her face. So we're starting to reduce those reds in the face here somewhat. Okay. And I can even put a little bit of lightness in there. So it's not so aggressive in the face. Can you see that we've somewhat reduced that there to there? Okay. It's about subtleties in this case. Okay. So I'm quite happy where it is at the moment. It's still quite red or more orangey color. Now we can solve that with the next step here, which is one of my favorites, is the dodge and burn step. Okay. So I'm going to run a dodge and burn on this image. And what my action does is two things. It creates a dodge layer, means paint with light, and a burn layer, and that's darken areas of an image. We'll put that into practice right now. Okay, so I'm going to go to dodge here. And what I want to do is I want to, again, use a big fat brush tool here. And again, I'm only playing with flow. Okay, so in this case here, +5. And I'm going to make a big fat brush like that. And I'm just going to sort of paint over her face very lightly. Just make sure my brush is white because we're painting on a black mask here. Okay. And I'm just going to lighten the face up just a tiny bit. Can you see that? So we're bringing it slowly but surely into the range of what the hands and the legs are. See that?
Yeah, it's much better.
Yeah. And I can come into the burn layer here and I can go back to the hands and these areas over here. And I can use burn. That's adding shadow into those areas. Do you understand?
Yep.
Burning is darkening an area. Okay. And I can see face, hands are starting to play together here at the same luminance ranges. Okay. Let me just flatten that out. Now I'm going to run that action again because I want to do the next step here. That's an important little part of my process here to create a little bit more of a fine art look. Okay. Now, this harks all the way back to the light patterns that I look for in my images. I like soft, pleasing light for my portraits. And when I find that light, I've got nice, soft light patterns. Okay. Look at the soft shadow that we've got going on underneath the chin here. Okay. Look at the soft shadow that we've got on the nose here, underneath the nose, and everywhere else. This shaded area here on her arm going down here is all really nice and soft. And what I like to do in this step here is accentuate that we've got in our scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the burn layer here. Okay. And now I'm going to start painting and accentuating the shadows in my image. Okay. And a good way to visualize the image in a luminance manner is to create a black and white layer. Okay. Now you're going to see all the luminance ranges in your image. Okay. You want black and white the image. Okay. So now you can see what stands out, what doesn't stand out. Okay. And what I'm going to do now is go to my burn layer, go to my brush tool, and with a very low flow of like 10%, and again, we're talking about flows here, I'm just going to start to accentuate the shaded areas in this image. Can you see that there's a shadow underneath the hat here?
Yeah, it's subtle.
It's very subtle. And what I'm going to do is I like to accentuate that. In other words, make it more evident and go over it very softly. Look at that. I'm almost making that shaded area bigger than it really is. Okay. Coming onto her nose here, coming into the little bits of the lips over here. I'm now going to start creating the shape of my subject. Now, this is where the sort of the artsy-fartsy side of things come in. Okay. Now, I'm really adjusting the size of my brush constantly here. I'm going into this area of her chin and I'm really rounding it off, and I'm creating shadows, maybe where there isn't really that much shadow, but I'm creating a little bit more form into her face here. Okay. Continue further down here. I can add in a little shaded area over here. I can come in around her waistcoat over here, extending that shadow a little bit further and deepening that shadow. See what's happening there?
Yep.
Big fat brush over here, nice big fat solid shadow going on down there. Okay, let's zoom out and see what that looks like. Okay, when I switch it on and off. See what's happening. Really creating the shape and dimension in that subject. Okay. Now, if it's too aggressive, you can always just pull back on the opacity a little bit. Everybody with me still?
Yeah, that's great.
Yep, okay. And I can come into the dodge layer over here now, and I can paint with light, for example. So I can go with my brush tool again, another still the same flow, and I can highlight the highlights in her hair. I can paint with light now. Okay, so I'm going to give her a little bit more of a rounder belly just using light. Down the arms here, paint down the extremities of the arms here, and now I'm starting to create that shape and form, and really by using light and dark accentuate portions of my image. Okay, we're doing this in black and white because we want to look at our image from a luminance perspective. So when I turn this off, look where we're at now.
Yeah, so it's nice the way you can kind of sculpt where the light and darks go. Yeah, it's nice.
And obviously, if it's way too much, sometimes you can over-egg this. It can get out of control fairly fast. So sometimes you only need to have a very low opacity on these layers. And sometimes when you get the light just right, sometimes you don't even have to apply it at all. But this is where it's going to. Okay. So I'm going to flatten that, and I'm happy with the dodge and burn process that I've done there. Okay. Now I'm still feeling that the yellows are a little bit too yellow for my personal taste. Okay. And all I'm going to do in this case here, and this is actually something that I released on my blog the other day, about how to work on your background alone and separate it from your subject. So you can come in and go to filter, go to camera raw filter, and when that opens, you go over to your masking tools over here, and you go select subject. And what's going to happen here is that your subject is going to be isolated from the background in this first instance. You can play around with the exposure here of your subject alone. Okay. this is what I'm probably going to do here. I'm just going to add a little bit more lightness just to my subject on this initial face. I'm going to create another mask. And this one, again, is going to be a select subject mask. Okay. And what we're going to do in this instance here, we're going to invert that mask. So that I'm only selecting my background. Okay. So I've got my background selected. Let's switch off that show layer there. And now I can work with the exposure of that background. But what I'm looking to really do here is to bring down the highlights just a tiny little bit here. But what I'd like to do is desaturate it. Look at that. So I'm just desaturating some of those yellows and just generally all the colors in the background. And I've done that because I'm really going to match up the colors that she's wearing here to this little bit of greenery that we've got going on down here. Here we go. See that? Everybody there?
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Okay. I was just making sure we didn't lose it on the stream. Now the thing is, I can come into this little area over here. I created another hue and saturation. I can click in this little area over here, pick up those greens, or it shows as yellows at the moment, but we'll try and make a better selection. I'm going to ramp this all the way to the top. I always do this so I get a proper visual reference as what's being selected. Now I'm going to just scroll this color selection over a little bit here. And now you can see that we've got those greens picked up there. You see that? Some of the greens in her dress here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to invert that, and I just want to think in this area here that we had selected. Maybe just in this case here, ramp up the flow so we don't have to keep painting over it. And what I'd like to do is just change the hues of that greenery there into a color that's closer to her outfit. There we go. So before and after. Very subtle change.
Yeah, nice.
So we can take this image back into Lightroom now. One of the things I'm going to do here, and it's bugging me a little bit, we'll go to liquify. And quite often with the liquify, I like to come in and correct things on the hat here, for example. There was a little bit of it was a bit weirdly shaped there. I know this is crazy, but it is sometimes the things that I like doing. Very subtly, just pushing in here and just a tiny bit, yeah. Okay. And we can take that back into Lightroom. And we'll have a look at the before and afters. So we started here, and I can right-click and reset the image quickly. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we started there, and we finished up with that image there. So we'll put those two next to each other. So you can see that everything that I've done now was just based off how we shot in the first instance. And I think this is the crux of the whole process. It needs to start out being at least half decent, okay? Capturing in the right light, capturing the subject with the right color combinations, in beautiful locations. And what I essentially did there was more down to the macro details of the image, and then bringing the colors in a bit closer to where I want them to be. I hope that makes sense, guys.
Yeah, it's great. It's good because it's a reminder that the things that people can sometimes take for granted in a photograph, you very clearly picked out were areas that are distracting from the overall feel of the photo. So
yeah. I mean, we can look at different examples here. Where I coming very close into the hair edge here, I took those little distractions out there. Just come back here. I think we've applied an effect here. over a raw file. I mean, over an edited file. Okay, there we go. So again, you know, I took out these distracting elements and redone the colors in the background. And again, it's all about starting off in the right, with the right lighting, the right colors. And that's essentially what it boils down to. So a lot of what I do in my work is really hinged off how I shoot. And that is the main factor. I mean, you can check out all of these shoots over here with these out of camera raw images. It really is down to the light, down to the styling. Now, this particular shoot, I can't exactly tell my client, hey, can your boys come up with better colors on their bike? But generally, look at the color selection here. Okay, it's non-intrusive pastel colors, essentially. And what we did there is reworked those colors. Let me just go back to this original here. So again, just looking at this, I said to myself, okay, let's look at the colors that are kind of offbeat here. And there was pretty much all of these here that they had on their shoes and their socks. It's kind of craziness there. Even the bike here. And look at the transformation between those.
Yeah, the blue of the bike was too distracting for sure.
Yeah, the blue of the bike was quite strong, but I think what was picking up on my eyes here, when you look at the original, was definitely the shoes and the socks.
The green, yeah.
Yeah. And this is probably one of the few clients that didn't really turn up with exactly what we wanted, but we can't expect that from everybody. Some people just haven't got a real sense of wardrobe, but that can change in post. And that looks so much better than where we started over here. But again, the fundamentals are in place. We've got distraction-free backgrounds. We've got a color palette over here that is more muted. It's not so bright, except for these little areas over here. But I said we can deal with that in post.
Great. Yeah, very nice. Excellent. Any questions? A lot of, nice compliments coming in. David says, excellent.
Here's another example.
Always neat to understand the why.
Yeah, well, I think this is the critical thing here. Is that if I go and shoot with Amy on her own, for example, we really go into the planning stages there to get the right colors, shoot in the right light here. Here again, we've got these out of camera images here. You can see that we've made a conscious decision as to the wardrobe with the yellow.
Matches the colors in the background.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we went for here. And oh man, I got actually some really nice through the viewfinder footage over here. Again, people were like arguing with me out on social media. Oh, Dan, you definitely used strobes, and I'm like, no. I got a particular one over here where I saw the light. Oh, her trying to be Harry Potter themed here. Right. Let's go forward over here. There's a particular portion of the scene here that just looked absolutely beautiful. Yes, I do shoot a lot, guys. I know. Yeah, there's just a spot in our forest here that just generates such beautiful light. Let me just scroll forward here. Oh yeah, here we go. When you look at that,
yeah,
just incredible soft light patterns. And when I saw that, then I changed up my gear. I was shooting here with a Sony A9 and then a 135mm f1.8. I shot it at f2 here for whatever reason. But again, that light pattern was just absolutely gorgeous on Amy.
Yeah, it's very nice. So Kathy says, definitely rewatching this. So much great information. Yeah. Good to see you here, Kathy.
So yeah, guys, I think the important thing to take away from this is that don't rely too much on the editing end of things. You know, we can get very involved with that part, but I see a lot of guys trying to fix things in Photoshop rather than enhancing. Okay, it's fixing common mistakes that can be avoided if you shoot in the right light, if you shoot with the right gear, if you pick your colors, you know, with a lot of planning with your clients. Okay, I shoot a lot with Amy, granted, but that does inspire my clients to actually get themselves dressed nicely. So, you know, it's important to look at how you are dressing your clients, what kind of style that you push out into social media, or your methods of marketing your business. Give people the idea that you're high end. High end doesn't just come from shooting with expensive gear. High end images come from the planning that you put into your shoot, where you're going to shoot, the type of light you're shooting in, the clothing styles that you're going to have for your clients, the colors. Those are the things that they're going to make you stand out from the crowd.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Well said. So any other questions? I think just a lot of people love the presentations. So I want to remind everyone where we can find Daniel. So you can find Daniel at shootcreatecaptivate.com, on Facebook, Shoot Create Captivate, and on Instagram, Shoot Create Captivate. Keeps it focused. I like that.
Yeah. When you said focused, actually, my very first name that I had for my business when I started out was Focus Studios. But I spelt focus with a K. And then for some of my South African friends, they were like, wow, that sounds like a swear, focus.
Yeah, right.
So
it's got a nice ring to it, though. Shoot, create, captivate. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how. Yeah, I think when I sort of kind of developed this whole idea or whole approach to the training side of things, it's like, for me, it always just, you know, shoot it, create it, captivate those moments with your clients. And I think that's where it all sort of strung together. Shoot, create, captivate. You guys can see some of my lens boxes in the back here.
Yeah.
135. Oh, sorry, 85 1.4, 135 1.8, and some of the things that I use here for my display calibration.
Yeah.
Some other little important things over here that I use, if you guys can see it, that
color checker
passport.
Or you got a lot of nice compliments coming in. So Andrew says, thank you so much. Really interesting and informative.
Oh, awesome, guys.
Dan says, great video.
I could share and I could talk for hours on the subject, guys. Honestly, it's just there's so many elements to it. You know, I've just covered really some of the essential basics here. But just to recap again, is that I think the important thing that you need to look at is the fundamentals of what happens when you shoot, having that beautiful light, getting your people dressed properly, choosing lovely locations, let it being distraction free. And then you'll find that when all those little things happen at camera level, you'll find that your editing process is snappier. I mean, I'm at average, I might spend maybe 15-20 minutes on an image, maybe even less.
Right. So Rip says, thank you for sharing your skills. Miriam says, really loved it. A lot of information. Ildiko says, thank you both. Lots of great info, Daniel.
That's my pleasure.
And Linda says, enlightening. Thank you. Good.
Thank you.
Good. So yeah, thanks everyone for being here. It's quite nice. Thank you, Daniel. It's very good. And once again,
thank you. I just also wanted to take this opportunity to thank Andrew for all the time and dedication put into the Photoshop and Lightroom group. I mean, wow. I mean, Andrew's been going for friggin' ages, and I'm probably old hat and kind of really grown with Andrew's group.
11 years. 11 years we're running that group. So
11 years. I think I climbed in maybe when it was 8 years. Oh,
yeah, great. That's good.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But yeah, once again, find Daniel at shootcreatecaptivate.com, on Facebook, Shoot Create Captivate, and on Instagram, Shoot Create Captivate. So yeah, thank you so much. It was really great.
Hey guys,
And
cool.
you know, I think a lot of people will be rewatching it to take those nice tips and tricks in, you know.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. I hope it's really been informative. I mean, I've got so much to share over on my training platform, guys. So if you really interested, you know, I go into so many more or so much more detail that you guys can pick up from there. So guys, thank you very much for your time and staying tuned. And again, thank you to Andrew for the time and effort.
That was excellent. Thank you. Thank you
Cool,
very much.
guys.
Have a good one.